Yeah.
This is the regular meeting for the Housing Committee for September 4th, 2024. We're going to call this meeting to order. We have, well, my name is Kathy Hunter, and I'll be chairing the meeting tonight. And we have with us tonight our Housing Committee members, Mary Dean, Elaine Feldman, and Chris Dickerson. We have some people that are excused tonight. Jim Graham wasn't feeling too good. Donovan has parent night at the school, and Warner Marshall is in Colorado, and Lou Schaefer has another engagement. And I have to announce that Miles Katz did resign from the Housing Committee. He is, I think, in New York right now, he's attending college at NYU. So we would wish him all the luck with his college career. So with that, the first item on our agenda is the minutes of August 7th. I hope everybody had a chance to review. And if so, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Well, in the minutes, we don't have Lou Schaefer down as having attended the last meeting. So he did attend the last meeting.
Good
Thank you.
pickup.
Good pickup, yeah.
He was here, yeah, he was,
Yeah, he was
yeah,
here.
he was here.
Why don't we approve the minutes and then we can have discussion after?
Well, he can approve
So
them
you
as
make the change and
amended.
then approve the
You
amended
have,
minutes.
you approve them as amended. I accept the amendment. I mean, I don't even think I have to. You just amend them. We all agree that's true. Lou Schaefer, okay.
Okay. Anything else, Chris? Huh?
Okay.
And Mary, I'd like to thank you for doing these minutes every month. I know they are a chore, and I appreciate you taking that on. So with that, well, I will make a motion to approve the minutes. Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? And I should note, we do have a quorum, just barely, but we do have a quorum tonight. Just in terms of some discussion on the minutes, first I'd like to just thank everybody for doing their emails, having their town designated emails as has been suggested. Some other updates from the minutes. We were supposed to have a training from Department of Housing on the incentive housing zones. That was supposed to happen last night, but that got postponed until the following week. So that is not following, the following meeting of TPC. So that will happen on October 7th.
We're invited to that?
Yeah, that would be a joint meeting of TPC and the Housing Committee.
Okay, October 7th?
October 7th. That's going to be a busy week. And just one other item. We had talked about updating the town's website. And Chris, thanks for following up with the town. I don't know if you've seen the town's website, but they did jazz it up. So I think it looks pretty good.
Allison Balsamas is the person who's responsible
Yeah.
for maintaining our committee's information. I guess they divide up
Right.
the information based
Based on
on
who
staff,
supports, right.
because there's a lot of information to put on the website. So Allison is our contact person. If we have information that we think needs to go there, we send it to her, and then they decide what to do with it.
Allison who?
Allison Balsamas.
Balsamics.
She's the assistant to Mika.
Right, the new one.
The new Jerry Shaw.
The new
The
Cherry.
new Jerry Shaw.
And I did, Chris, I took your advice, and I did put that SCROG resource, the housing resources, that's on there.
Okay.
And I also put on the resources I briefly discussed last meeting. It was the resources that was pulled together from the partnership and SCROG, and I think LISC, they compiled a whole inventory of housing resources for developing affordable housing, which I thought was very, very comprehensive and useful. So with that,
I did have one question about, any town can have a housing authority, state law, if the town qualifies. Is it based on the size of the town, or not
The-
necessarily?
The town has to make a finding of a lack of safe and sanitary housing.
So the town has to initiate it with
Right,
cause
right, so
to
everybody,
show-
any town could have a housing authority, but they would have to, have that finding, and then the Board of Selectmen would have to authorize the
I see.
creation. Yeah, so that could happen, that's something, we have discussed. I don't think, the town's ready to make any decision on that at this point, but, I think it's something that we should bring up from time to time, because it is a way of being able to create more affordable housing, to have a committee that actually is able to have the power to do that, as opposed to just us, making recommendations to the Board of Selectmen.
That would be well down the road, though, from where we're at, from where our committee's.
Well, it
correct?
may even be another committee, like for
mean,
instance,
yeah.
in Guilford, they have, they went from a, is she on yet? No. They went from a housing committee
Mhm.
to a housing commission, and I provided the ordinance on that. So I think that's the way the Board of
Sort of
Selectmen
the,
would like
pro-
to go. But at the same time, they've had a housing authority for a very long time.
Guilford has,
Guilford.
but we have not.
We have not, but it's something we could,
Yeah.
we could have both.
If the Board of Selectmen feels the need, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely.
So Warner was going to talk to someone in Guilford about the possibility of speaking to us. Do you happen to know if he has done that?
I don't believe he has. I know he and his wife went to Colorado. She has an elderly mother that lives out there, and they're gonna be there until the next 2 months. He's not coming back to
Wow.
October 9th.
Oh, wow.
I'm thinking maybe our November meeting, we can have him here.
Just
But in the meantime, I think we do have a lot to do in terms of, I think the POCD is gonna take up some time as well.
Yeah.
So, okay, so Sarah White is in. Do I have to do something, Nick? Okay. Okay. Hi, Sarah, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay. Well, I'd like to introduce Sarah White. Sarah White is a staff attorney with the Connecticut Fair Housing Center, and that's an organization that's dedicated to ensuring Connecticut residents have access to the housing of their choice, free from discrimination. And the reason why we have, Sarah here today, Sarah and the Fair Housing Center was very active in a situation in East Lyme, and I sent out a couple articles about that, where a new owner took over a housing development of which many residents were elderly and disabled, and raised rents substantially. And, what we thought would be a good idea was just to have, Sarah talk about, what in fact happened in East Lyme, and what the response was and what that looked like. So with that, I know, Sarah, you have limited time, and I appreciate you being here. So maybe if you could just walk us through that situation and how that was responded to. That would be appreciated.
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you so much for having me here. Like I said, my name is Sarah White. I've been an attorney at the Connecticut Fair Housing Center for the last 12 years. Before that, worked at different legal aid organizations on housing issues. And just to provide some context to the situation in East Lyme, in Connecticut, unless a town or a city has a fair rent commission, there's really no cap on how much a landlord can increase rent. And that does create the conditions for situations like we saw in East Lyme, where a relatively stable group of tenants who are great tenants paying their rent on time have a new owner and are suddenly hit with really large rent increases. And this is something we've seen all over the state. Sometimes it's $200, which for someone on a fixed income can be a lot to bear. Sometimes it can be as much as $800, $900, $1,000, like we saw in East Lyme, that families are asked to pay really within 45 days. So there is no overall limit on rent increases. We do have a law in Connecticut called Just Cause, which limits rent increases for elderly and disabled tenants to ones that are fair and equitable, which is not defined by the law. But as a practical matter, unless a town or city has a fair rent commission, there's really no practical way for a tenant to challenge a rent increase without going to court, which is really difficult for folks to do on their own, and there's very limited access to legal services. But fair rent commissions are an option that towns and cities have, as we saw in East Lyme. These are volunteer boards just made up of ordinary residents that have the power to limit rent or rent increases if they find that a rent increase is harsh and unconscionable, or for elderly and disabled tenants that the rent is not fair and equitable. And we've had these since 1969. There were about 24 in our state until a couple years ago when the law passed to require them in towns and cities of 25,000 or more. And we now have 54 fair rent commissions in Connecticut, and 8 of them actually are in towns where the population is under 25,000, some very small towns that have just chosen to have these because it's such a resource for tenants in situations like this and to resolve other conflicts. But for some more background on what happened in East Lyme, back in June, a landlord and developer, Alpha Capital, purchased a complex in Niantic called Windward Village. East Lyme at that time did not have a fair rent commission. This is a complex of about 60 apartments. Although it was not income restricted or elderly disabled designated, around 40 of the 60 apartments, so 2/3, were occupied by elderly tenants or else disabled tenants. So covered by that Just Cause law that we've had for many years that says a rent increase can't be, has to be fair and equitable, but like we talked about, doesn't really have a remedy for that necessarily. This was mostly long-term residents, many of them on fixed incomes, and as we know, for seniors who are on fixed incomes, any rent increase can be really difficult to bear since they're limited in how much money they have. Often every penny is budgeted for, and seniors are really vulnerable to these situations in general, and need a more not just competent but really excellent property management. Seniors have higher rates of disabilities, both physical disabilities, so maintenance of the property and of the unit is incredibly important, as well as cognitive disabilities, visual disabilities, that make it really important that they have, clear information, have a, landlord that's going to work with them to make sure they understand and don't, experience disability discrimination, based on any of these things. So Alpha Capital is based here in Connecticut. It was started by someone who was an undergrad at Quinnipiac who dropped out to start essentially flipping houses, those sort of you buy houses signs that you see, and then a couple years ago moved into purchasing multifamily housing and smaller apartment complexes that he believes were not charging as much rent as the market would bear, with the intent of making some renovations but really quickly increasing the rent and making a significant profit. And with this complex in East Lyme, this is explicitly what he said in news articles that he set out to do, that he believed that rents were under market value for the area and that they could quickly increase the value of the property by millions of dollars within a year of purchasing it by increasing rents. This is something Alpha Capital has done throughout the state in the last couple of years. In Wallingford, in New London, they tried to do it in Hartford, but a group of tenants I worked with fought back using the Fair Rent Commission and were able to convince him to sell the property. So right away after Alpha purchased this property in East Lyme, residents were told they were going to see very large rent increases as soon as their rents were up. Folks there were paying, in the neighborhood of $1,400, $1,500 a month for, small apartments, and were hit with $800, $900, $1,000 a month rent increases, with as little as 30 to 45 days to decide whether they could do that or else get out. One example was an disabled tenant with a child whose income was really just Social Security, who was paying about $14.50 a month for a 2-bedroom. She was told she had to get out within 30 days or else accept an $800 a month rent increase, so increasing her rent to $2,250. This was a really appalling situation that kind of shocked this community, and residents started meeting right away with help from the Center for Housing Equity and Opportunity, with tenant organizers from New London who'd seen the same thing happen with Alpha Capital Purchase Properties, as well as with other landlords down there. And actually, the first selectman's elderly mother lived at the complex as well. So after a couple of these meetings at the VFW, the residents there decided they were going to go to council and ask them to propose and pass a Fair Rent Commission ordinance, creating one of these Fair Rent Commissions, so that they would actually have a venue to be able to challenge these rent increases, both for tenants who are covered by just cause because they're elderly or disabled, as well as for the other tenants that lived there who were facing the loss of their home and maybe having to move out of this community entirely because they could no longer afford the rent. And it happened incredibly quickly in East Lyme. And, within the matter of really just August, they all went to the council meeting as a group, raising this idea, explaining their situation and these really shocking rent increases that everyone was facing. And within the next week or so, I worked with the town to, we have a model Fair Rent Commission ordinance, and so many communities have just gone through this process, whether they were required to or chose to have a Fair Rent Commission just because it's so beneficial. And we're able to get it passed, I think it was about 2 weeks ago. So now they're in the process of appointing commissioners, creating a process for it, but it's going to give these tenants a venue to challenge these rent increases and have the opportunity to stay in their apartments. Many folks have lived there for decades, whereas otherwise they would have had to move and potentially had to leave this community. So that's the overall story of what happened, but I think it really does illustrate the importance of at least considering Fair Rent Commissions before a situation like this happens. And Fair Rent Commissions have more benefits than just these very large kind of nightmare rent increases. They also can help facilitate conversation between landlords and tenants, because sometimes that can be all it takes to work out a problem. If there are issues with conditions, they can be helpful. And having them in place is usually not much of an administrative burden for a town. Many small towns, I can't remember the smallest one, but there's one town that has one that has around a population of 7,000. Not a lot of work on the town's end in terms of staffing to run one, but do serve such an important purpose for tenants in situations like these where a new landlord comes in with a different mindset or than the previous landlord and really drastically increases rent. It can be the difference between tenants having to leave or having to try to navigate a court process that is kind of inherently unfriendly to tenants, or having the option to stay in their units. So I'm happy to answer any more questions about the situation in East Lyme or what we're seeing around the state with Fair Rent Commissions. One of the things I've been doing over the last couple of years is training new Fair Rent Commissions, working with municipalities to pass ordinances, and I think they really do have a lot of benefit, and would love to see them in more places across the state.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. First, I'll ask my housing committee members, does anybody have any questions for Sarah?
I do, but I don't know. I don't know how to formulate it. So does the Fair Rent Commission actually have teeth? I mean, can you? Yes, I guess that's the question. Can you prevent?
Yeah.
Something that and who deems it? How is it deemed unfair? I mean, to us, it's blatantly unfair, but of course, not everybody's going to agree with that. So
right. So usually the makeup of the commission, I mean, it's up to the town, but it's usually a mix of landlords who live in the community, tenants who live in the community, homeowners, and the unfairness standard. I mean, there are 14 factors the state statute list that the commission can consider, but it's essentially sort of a like community standard, like the community sense of unfairness. And the vast majority of fair rent commission decisions are unanimous despite representation from landlords and tenants. But I mean, the factors are, include things like the size and history of rent increases, the condition of the property, the landlord's expenses, the tenant's income, trying to think if there's any, and like the availability of alternative housing. But really, I mean, it is up to the commission and their kind of shared sense of fairness. And usually, I mean, I think for most of us, we know it when we see it, and the factors can just kind of like guide the decision. In terms of enforceability, so the decision of a fair rent commission does have the force of law. It does have to be followed. And if, a landlord, for example, was requesting like more rent than was allowed, then the commission does have the authority to, hold a hearing, to issue an order that they stop it. The municipality could, in theory, enforce the order in court, but in reality, like, the decisions are mostly followed, so those remedies are rarely used.
Okay, thank you.
So in terms of determining what is a fair increase in rent, what are some of the factors that are used, or is there a percentage that's used, or are certain parameters that are used?
There's not a percentage. It's really, the way I frame it is like individualized rent stabilization. It's definitely not rent control or anything like that, because it does not deal with the market as a whole. It just gives an individual tenant, a forum to say, this is unfair, and sort of based on their individual circumstances for the commission to find the rent increase is okay, or it could be phased in over time to give people more time to increase their income, or a portion of it allowed. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility. But I mean, the decision is guided by these factors, which are going to be individualized. I would say the practical matter, the most important tend to be the size and history of the rent increase. Smaller rent increases over time are less likely to be found harsh and unconscionable, whereas a very large rent increase overnight, even if presumably a tenant could afford it, which most of the time they can't, but even if they could, a commission is fairly likely to determine as harsh and unconscionable. But it really is just no one on the commission has to be an expert. Most are not experts. It's sort of based on I guess conscience of the community is kind of a good way to think of it. And, as long as it can be justified based on these factors, they have a lot of flexibility to come up with a decision that, works for the situation. And like I said, it doesn't have to be all for the tenant or all for the landlord. They could allow a phase in increase. They could allow a partial rent increase. They could ask for certain repairs to be made before a rent increase goes into effect, which is unfortunately often the situation that the tenant is willing to pay more, but wants their stove to work, or things like that.
Did fair housing commissions ever receive assistance from the town to help manage the rent increase? Oftentimes a rent increase will occur because a property is revalued and the property value increases, so the landlord has to pay a dramatically higher tax amount, and that needs to be passed on. So has any of these 54 commissions dealt with managing that increased tax burden on the landlord by offering relief?
So they're in terms of money to pay towards the tenant's rent, no, but a property tax increase goes into that factor I mentioned, the landlord's increased expenses, and it's more likely in that situation that a commission would find that that's reasonable. Maybe it needs to be phased in over a period of time so it's not as much of a shock to the tenant. But those are situations where often the commission will find that persuasive. Obviously if the costs have gone up, that's not something the landlord can control, and will either allow the increase or allow it to be phased in. I think where fair rent commissions become particularly important are these situations like in East Lyme, where there wasn't a reevaluation. It was really just
Buy low, sell high.
the capital's
That's what it
desire
was.
to
Yeah.
double their investment in a year, or that's maybe a slight overestimation of what they were promising, but I mean that was it was just profit.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is there any other questions
No,
for?
I'm fine. Those are good questions.
Oh,
and
sorry, I
answers.
have a couple questions, but do you have I know you squeezed us in for tonight. Do you have a hard stop at 7:30 or?
I'm actually at another meeting of tenants, so I have to go back to them in a moment.
Oh,
but,
okay, all right.
You can definitely, I'll share my email address. It's
Yeah.
swhite, SWHITE, @ctfairhousing.org. And I'm always happy to answer questions about fair and commissions. I work a lot with attorney Rafi Podolsky with Connecticut Legal Services, who's been doing this work with me for the last few years and advising municipalities, training fair and commissions, really reviving them. Because there was a period through the 70s, the 80s, into the 90s where they were very active throughout the state, played a really important role. But then we had a period in the early 2000s where there weren't a lot of rent increases, so many of them withered, and they've really been revived since the pandemic. And I think are playing a really important role to give relief to tenants, and also sometimes just allow landlords and tenants to talk and work things out.
Great. Well, thank you very much, and I know you need to get back to your tenant meetings. That's where the important work is, and we appreciate taking some time out of your meeting time to talk to us about this really important issue. So thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.
Oh, I thought that was useful.
Yeah,
Interesting.
interesting.
What-
Yeah.
Do we know how many rental units there are in Woodbridge?
In Woodbridge?
We
All
do.
Yeah.
all together.
It was in
Yeah.
the report.
I think it might have been in the report.
I'm sure we do know. That was a rhetorical question. Yes, we know, but do we know?
Do we know? Oh,
Give me a second.
I should know that.
There's my little.
No.
I mean, they're
yeah,
right
Chris
next door to
printed
me,
everything
for
out.
example.
I didn't
My
print
next door
everything, but I
neighbors are
printed a
rental
lot.
units.
You know, I must say, and I should have put this in my email, that those reports I sent out yesterday, those are very much draft. That's just kind of
Yes.
first
Yeah,
version.
those are draft.
Because we're going to be reviewing it, and I'm sure there's probably things, that you're going to pick up on that need to be, revised, corrected. But that was just for, our initial conversation on the POCD. So just bear in mind that is a draft form.
So these will be revised.
They will be revised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Who is doing the revisions? Will we be involved in that?
You can make comments to me, and I
Okay.
could
So
give them
this
to
is
Chris.
town plan and zoning.
This is TP&Z.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Yep.
I just got this from a meeting last night, and we could share the information, but we need to advise that this is not a final form,
Okay.
that this is very much a draft.
Okay.
So if you see anything that looks a little
A lot of questions.
not quite right, please send them on to me, and I could send them on to Chris. Did we find that?
Well, they do some math.
I think there is a number in
It says
here.
89.9% are one-unit detached structures. So if I can use my calculator, I'll get you the number.
89.9%?
Uh,
No,
Let's
that
see.
can't be right.
I thought there was an actual number in there.
I thought so too, but I'm
But
not
that
seeing
doesn't
it yet.
actually-
It's interesting. It's like roughly 350 are not single family or more than single family, which could be right.
Yeah.
I'm looking to see if it has a
250
number.
single family as opposed to
What's that?
250 single family houses.
350.
350.
No, non-single family.
No.
So more
Rental
than
units.
one family house.
Well, you can have a rental unit that's a house, can't you?
Well, does that
can.
include,
But I'm talking,
the
we're talking about,
assist-
if you're looking at single-family detached homes, there's 89.9% one-unit detached structures. So that's a single-family detached home. Some of those are rented.
89.9% of what?
Single
Of the
family.
of Woodbridge's housing stock
Is rental?
is
No, is
one
one-
unit detached structure,
Correct,
okay?
yeah,
They can be owned or rented,
right.
okay? I don't
Right.
think that's broken down in here,
That's what, yeah.
okay? It says
So
8
does
point-
that, so another important question on these things, is sometimes these statistics include the assisted living facilities.
You know,
And
that's,
sometimes they do not.
I
I
wonder-
that, you know, I didn't, I literally looked at this today and I
Right,
printed
right,
it and
right.
I
No, I
started
know.
going through and I have lots of
Right.
questions.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a really important question.
It's a very important
Okay.
question.
We have a discussion for agenda item 4, but why don't we get through
Okay.
agenda item 3? And
Okay.
then we could talk
Yeah.
more about the POCD.
'Cause you
Okay.
want-
So at this point, I'd like to open this up for public comment. And do we have anybody here for public comment? Oh, yes, we do. And if you could please sign in.
Sure. Thank you. Before I begin public comment, let me apologize for wanting to read a script as my public comment because I'm not very good and I sometimes just
And Scott, tell the
They
Yeah.
gotta
Town who
do
you are.
the-
But I will. I sure will, Chris. But I just want to let you know I'm going to read my public comment so I get it right. Good evening, members of the Housing Committee.
We have to have yours.
My name is Scott Hunter. I'm a resident and elector of Woodbridge, living at 52 Indian Trail. I'm here to make public comment to address a critical issue regarding the Warner elderly housing community. Our town is facing challenges related to homelessness and affordable housing. And while some may believe that Woodbridge is insulated from these problems, the reality is we're not. We must act now to safeguard our affordable housing resources, particularly for our most vulnerable residents, the elderly and disabled. I would like to share the story of Warner, the lessons we must learn, and the steps, in my opinion, we need to take moving forward. According to the first selectman when he took office, town officials advised him to move forward with the Warner Elderly Housing Project deal with Alpha Capital, led by Tyler Smith, so that the town would not have to be directly involved. This advice was short-sighted. Our town needs to be actively engaged in these decisions, not to avoid responsibility, but to protect our residents, especially those most in need. Warner is a cornerstone of affordable elderly housing in Woodbridge, comprising 30 rental apartments on municipally owned land under a long-term ground lease that runs until 2050. This project represents 75% of our town's affordable housing stock, making it crucial not only for housing, but for meeting broader community goals. In April 2024, the Board of Selectmen was willing to approve the assignment of this project to Alpha Capital, despite obvious signs that they lacked experience in managing elderly housing. This unanimous decision to approve Alpha Capital was made hastily, without proper vetting, conditioned on a vague directive to consult with the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, CHFA. I recognize the need for more thorough diligence and intervene, contacting CHFA and making public comments to urge caution. Despite my efforts and community concern, CHFA was prepared to approve Alpha Capital. Thanks to continued advocacy, however, CHFA tabled the final decision, buying the town time to reconsider this critical issue. Additionally, I would like to submit the public comment I made at the CHFA board meeting on May 30th, 2024, to be part of this record. That comment and the action item for CHFA to move forward with Alpha Capital was tabled based on that public comment. The board meeting is available on CPTV and the CHFA website for those who wish to review the public comment and the Warner discussion that followed. There are three key issues. The first is Alpha Capital's business model. Alpha Capital has a troubling track record of acquiring properties, making minimal improvements, and raising rents to maximize profits. This business model often leads to tenant displacement and undermines the stability of affordable housing. Warner is fully occupied and the town needs to ensure affordable housing for the elderly and disabled going forward. However, Alpha Capital's strategy prioritized profit extraction over community well-being, which is unacceptable for a project like Warner. Secondly, there's a need for experienced management. Elderly housing requires specialized management that includes residential service coordinators and a deep understanding of residents' needs. Alpha Capital lacks this experience, and their involvement would jeopardize the safety and well-being of Warner's elderly and disabled residents. The last issue involves CHFA's mission. CHFA's mission is to support affordable housing for low and moderate income individuals and families. While they have done considerable good across Connecticut, they must be reminded sometimes to uphold their mission. Allowing Alpha Capital to take over Warner without thorough due diligence undermines this mission and risks pushing our town's affordable housing resources into decline. At this point, I'd like to show a video clip from a podcast featuring Tyler Smith and the CEO of Alpha Capital. While I strive to remain professional in my comments, I believe that professionalism should not prevent the committee from being aware of troubling business practices. This clip contains explicit language, but I believe it is important to hear the unfiltered reality of the people involved in this deal. Please feel free not to watch, but I encourage you, if you choose to watch, to listen carefully to what is said, as it provides insight into the mindset of Alpha Capital. There's a buffer on this of about 9 seconds.
They don't even realize. They don't no fucking clue, right? So they have 2 bedrooms, right? They're renting out for $950. So I can come in, I can pay 7 cap, right? But I could take that $950 apartment, spend $20K, right, renovate it, and bring those up to $1,600, $1,700, right? And like what I tell my guys is like, listen, a property is worth what it produces in income, right? So my big thing is forced appreciation, right? If I could go in and double the NOI, the value of the asset is naturally going to double. Right? So you could go in and pay a fair price for these assets, right? Bring the rents all the way up, and now in under a year, the property went from $2 million to $5 million, right? But like that's the other thing. So it's like you're still going in and giving them a good price, but since their assets are, you know, maybe need renovation, maybe the rents are low, right? You can go in there, pay a good price, but still get a home run on it. So it's like still a win-win for everyone, and they know they can get more rent. They know their fucking rent's low, but they're like, you know, Johnny's been with me for 20 years. You know,
Pays on time in full every month.
you know, he's a good tenant. I don't want to raise his rent. I'm like, fuck it, raise his rent.
Yeah. I watched his kids grow up.
You
Yeah.
know, but listen, that's like, listen, some people, I go into the deal, and obviously, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, you tell people, listen, you've been getting a great deal for a long time. You should be thankful for that.
Yeah, I ripped it 5, but I push it 6 feet. Hey, nigga, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go.
For me, like, I want to be in your face. I want you to know who I am, and I want you to know that like I'm calling and I want it, right? Because that's like what people like, right? Business people, dude, they like people that are aggressive. They like people that are persistent, right? And it's not like I'm like aggressive to the point where I'm like calling you every day, right? But there's like a certain level of like persistence and aggressiveness. You got to find that like middle ground where it's like you're persistent enough and you're aggressive enough, but you're not like too aggressive. You know what I mean?
Almost like where it's like funny. You're like, this guy's fucking
Yeah.
crazy.
But yeah, exactly.
But now you're staying top of mind, like you said. Maybe he doesn't want to sell today, tomorrow, next week. But when he does, who's he going to think of?
Exactly.
That's it.
And it's like, John, listen, when you are ready to sell, dude, I'm going to be here to buy it.
Yeah.
You know?
And even if that takes 2 years, I'm going to call you 30 times between then and now.
100%, dude. And we're going to build that relationship, right? And I think that's why it's important. And then when you get to the end of that cycle, they want to give you a great deal because they're like, this guy. You know what I mean? I have a deal that I actually just got this morning. It's a 30 unit. And this deal is fucking sick. I'm super excited about it, right? So I've been working this guy for, dude, like fucking probably 2.5 years, right? So I did one deal with him, and this is the second deal. It's a 30-unit complex, and basically he built it, right? And it's like a tax credit CHFA deal, a little complicated, but basically he made his money on the build, he got tax credits, and then he cash flowed on the property for the last 30 years. So basically what I'm doing is I'm assuming the mortgage, right? It's like a $1.8 million mortgage at 4%, right? And he pretty much was like, Tyler, he's like, just give me $100,000 and I'll walk away.
What?
Right? $100,000 down, right? And I'm assuming the loan, and he walks away. That deal, year one, cash flows $120,000 without any stabilization.
Wow.
If I only raise the rents $150 per unit, which is like still way below market, it cash flows $170,000 NOI, right?
Whoa.
That's not even, that's net, right?
You get 100% return of capital, more than 100%
It's
return of capital.
120% cash on cash going in.
That's
Stupid.
ridiculous.
Absolutely
What?
stupid, right? But the thing is like persistence, right? And when I was on the phone with his attorney, the attorney's like, you know, John, you could probably get more than this. And John's like, you know, Tyler, I've done a lot of work. I probably could get more. Listen, I was like, dude, listen, I hear you. So what are we gonna do? I was like, I hear you. He's like, I could probably get more. I was like, dude, I hear you.
He's like, all right, let's do the deal.
Yeah, exactly. And then he was like, all right, let me think about it. He called me. He's like, you know what, Tyler? He's like, if I were you, I would want to get a great deal. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm like, say less.
Oh
I'll take
my
it.
God,
I'll
that's
take
sick.
it.
That's sick.
Thank you for that. Alpha Capital's problematic practices are not confined to Woodbridge. In East Lyme, as we just heard from Sarah White, staff attorney for Connecticut Fair Housing Center, they raised rents by up to $900 per month at the Windward complex, triggering a crisis that led to the establishment of a fair rent commission. Similar issues arose in Hartford earlier, where tenants faced eviction due to Alpha Capital's actions. Currently, I can document over 70 eviction actions in the last couple of years brought by Alpha Capital, representing a concerning proportion of tenant displacement relative to the total number of units owned. There have also been reports of deceptive practices, such as Alpha Capital employees posing as tenants during legislative testimony about tenant protections from potentially discriminatory no-fault evictions, raising serious ethical and legal concerns. Given these facts, it is critical, in my opinion, you take action to protect Warner and our broader affordable housing resources. I recommend the following. 1, withhold consent to the assignment of the Warner ground lease to Alpha Capital based on their lack of experience and the potential harm to elderly and disabled residents. 2, issue a request for qualifications, an RFQ, to identify a qualified and experienced operator for Warner, one that CHAFA and the current owner approve, that prioritizes the well-being of residents and meets the specialized requirements of elderly housing management. 3, enhance local tenant protections available under state law to prevent displacement and ensure that operators are held accountable to our community. Thank you for your attention to this critical issue. The decisions made tonight will not only affect the residents of Warner, but will also set a precedent for how we manage and protect our affordable housing going forward. I provided a copy of this written comment for your records, along with a public comment from the Chaffaa Board meeting on May 30th, 2024. And the Housing Committee deems it appropriate. I have no objection if the committee decides to withhold these clips from the public rebroadcast of this meeting, should that be preferred and in the interest of professionalism. Let us commit to proceed to a process that upholds the dignity and security of our most vulnerable citizens, ensuring that they live in a supportive and well-managed environment. I have closely followed this matter and understand the complexities of this transaction, which can sometimes lead to misunderstandings or misrepresentations. I'm available for discussion and ready to address any questions or concerns you may have to ensure clarity and avoid any such misunderstandings or misrepresentations. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
Have you presented this to the Board of Selectmen?
No.
You need to, because they're the board that has the ability to make that decision. It's not us. It's the Board of Selectmen. They're the ones that can influence whether that deal is done or not.
I appeared.
Encourage
Just
you to
if-
go
yeah.
and present this to the Board of Selectmen.
So, how this occurred, and I've been trying, I appeared at the Board of Selectmen meeting when on the agenda was to approve the assignment of the ground lease to Tyler Smith. And I had noticed very short, and I looked at that and it said action as appropriate, so I made public comment. The best I was able to do was to have a break put on that they approved the assignment of the ground lease to Tyler Smith and Alpha Capital, subject to a discussion with Chaffaa. That's in the minutes of the Board of Selectmen meeting. That's the best I could do, Chris.
So far.
So
Has
what
the
I
Board
did-
of Selectmen approved
Here-
that? Have they approved Alpha Capital?
You can read the board meeting.
No, have they done
You
it?
can read the
Well,
board
you know.
minutes. The answer is in the board minutes, and it says, by unanimous approval, they consent to the assignment of the ground lease to Alpha Capital on the condition
Yes.
that there's discussion with Chaffaa.
Okay.
That's what that says. You decide what that says. Not their words, not mine.
Okay. Fair enough.
And
Thank
so
you.
based on that
Appreciate it.
discussion, so I mentioned it to the Board of Selectmen, and based on that discussion, I went to Chaffaa, because Chaffaa was moving forward to a full board hearing
Mhm.
where the mortgage committee the night before had approved it. And so I made that public comment. Please by all means read that public comment, but I made it to the full Chaffaa board. And on that board was the Commissioner of Housing, the Executive Director of Chaffaa, the Commissioner of Banking, and the Commissioner of Economic Development, the state of Connecticut. And I made that comment, and they tabled a resolution that they were recommending and went on to make the recommendation, but some folks made a motion to table it, giving us time to revisit this.
So the answer to the question is the Board of Selectmen, the decision has not been made yet. So there's still time to.
Again, that my recommendation is to you guys, or is that we not approve that assumption.
We
based
don't
upon-
approve any of this.
But our
Yeah.
job is to provide recommendations to the Board of Selectmen. And
Yeah.
I really feel that we do need to take action. We do not have this on our agenda. What I would like to do is to make a motion to amend the agenda to have a discussion on the Warner, so we could act on this. We can bring a resolution for action to the Board of Selectmen for them to consider for the next week's meeting. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to amend our agenda, to discuss the Warner.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'm gonna remove, I mean, I'm happy to have a discussion if you
We
want.
haven't even voted on our motion yet, so I know.
Oh, sorry about that, sorry.
Okay.
I'm not very good at the government stuff.
All in favor? Thanks. All right, so
As I said, I'm happy to stay, and if I can provide any feedback into the terms of the deal. But, you know, it's a tricky, I mean, it's a housing committee, and I think one of the things that's important is that a housing committee should be concerned about housing. And so I think it's a topic that really should be contained, and maybe, like you said, down the road, Chris and others, there's gonna be a fuller view of our housing issues in town. But at the same time it needs to start somewhere, and the Board of Selectmen, if they approved it, need to then talk about what that condition was they had and how they're not approving it. And hopefully this will compel Chaffa. As I spoke, as you read my comment to Chaffa, I said that maybe my comment is more directed towards the town. But at the same time when I make this comment to you, maybe my comment is more directed towards Chaffa. While we need their help, and we appreciate their help in providing low and moderate income assistance to families throughout Connecticut, we also need them to do the due diligence to help us out by not moving forward with an approval of this kind of situation. So they could also rescind because both parties have to consent. And so it's not just this, it's both.
Yes.
And so I'm making comments to both of you, and I'm hoping to get to the right place of our.
And what I'm saying is, I think it would be helpful for you to make those same comments to the Board of Selectmen. I'm not saying that we're not gonna do that as well, but it's helpful for the Board of
I'm
Selectmen
not
to
a
hear.
committee member of the board, I can
You
do public
can
comment,
go
and
to
I have.
public comment and make these comments at public comment, and that means a lot to people in the Board of Selectmen.
I think,
They can also watch this.
I think appending the information about East Lyme would be very potent too. That has happened since these,
Correct.
Since the last.
Circumstances, correct?
East Lyme has happened, and there's lots of details around that if you watch all the public comments, which I have, from East Lyme and the town meetings. And also the Connecticut Examiner article about the imposting, the sending, not referencing that they work for Capital, but 8, actually, I count 8 employees wrote letters saying that the ability to evict a month-to-month tenant, and not have this new law that, requires some, and I'm not a real expert on this stuff, I'm not a housing advocate, I'm an advocate for Woodbridge. But they were trying to, essentially, the argument in that article was, that's a concern if they're trying to make public comment and posting as a tenant to try to defeat a law that allows them more effectiveness to raise rent and just evict tenants, or evict tenants to be able to raise the rent. And, I'm not a real expert, Sarah knows that stuff, and Kathy, and you guys need to get up to speed on that stuff, so that's why I'm here. Chris, Board of Selectmen's, they make decisions, they're not the experts, you guys are gonna be the experts.
But they're the ones that make the decisions.
Yeah, but they need to hear from the experts.
I understand.
And I'm just some crazy
Wait.
wackadoo public comment guy.
But you're giving us this information, and what I'm saying is, the Board of Selectmen, I sat on the Board of Selectmen. You don't have the time to watch every single video on every single board. You don't have the time. So if you were to go and give them a 5-minute presentation, that's really powerful. They're not gonna be able to take the time to watch our 2-hour-long meeting, and the next 2-hour-long meeting, and the next 2-hour-long meeting.
Chris,
So,
that-
I'm just saying that this is gonna be more powerful, that's all.
But as I say,
That's it.
I make this comment to a housing committee because the power
Yeah.
would come from a housing.
Sure. Hey,
Scott, you said both entities have to agree, meaning Chaffa and Board of
Yes, as Mr.
Selectmen?
Smith indicated, he wants to assume a mortgage from Chaffa.
Yeah.
And so Chaffa has to approve him to assume the mortgage.
Does,
And then the property is owned on a ground lease. So before he can assign before the current owner can assign the ground lease to Tyler Smith, Mr. Smith, Alpha Capital, then the town has to approve that, has to consent to the assignment of that ground lease, not such consent not to be unreasonably withheld. My opinion and my recommendation to you is that somebody without experience in elderly housing requires specialized management, residential service coordinators. You could have people in their 90s losing cognitive abilities that need to find counseling to be able to, if they can't live in the Warner and continue to have independent living, they need counselors that are on the property management team to identify that situation as it comes up, not just trying to raise rent and say, you know, Betty, Sam, you know, we've got services for you that you should contact because, you know, you're getting to a point now where it doesn't make sense to be, you know, those residential service coordinators are not in that business model because he's never managed an affordable or elderly housing. And elderly housing, the definition is elderly and disabled. So it's a whole different kettle of fish to have this person and company as an operator of elderly housing. It's a whole different thing. And I'm quite shocked that Jaffa and the town of Woodbridge were that far along in the process.
And Sarah White did allude to the same thing at the East Line.
Yep.
You know, that you need to have, you know, a specialty in managing this population. So with that, you know, I think in order to just kind of put this into action, I started like just scribbling some stuff. Now you had some information that's going to go into the record.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, if you could, this way I
Give
could.
that to Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, actually give it to me first, because I want to cheat and craft the resolution. And then we could,
Can I just say, it seems to me that we can address this particular set of circumstances, but let's just assume that that it falls apart. There's nothing to keep somebody else from coming aboard and pretending to be all heart and soul, and then turning around and doing something similar to that. The solution would be to have the Fair Rent Commission.
That's just
Fair
what I was
Housing
going to say.
Commission.
How do you prevent
What
this
we
same
would
thing from
be-
happening again?
What we would perhaps want to mention, introduce to the Board of Selectmen, is that this illustrates the vulnerability of renters in our town.
yeah.
And particularly in this situation. Generally speaking, it's not going to happen to one house or another, who knows, but definitely a situation like this where you have a number of units and you can really start milking them in a hurry.
Yeah.
It's vulnerable.
My opinion for this particular resolution is just to stick to getting Alpha Capital out. I don't want to start throwing in a Fair Rent Commission with that, because then
I'm gonna beg my idea.
I think
Thank you.
that's going to require like a lot more discussion. So I think
No,
first,
I just meant, forgive me, I didn't mean to.
yeah, I
I
think,
think that it illustrates the vulnerability of that particular, that unit to this kind of market forces manipulation.
yeah.
Kathy, does Chaffa typically do their due diligence? I mean, is this like an
I have-
aberration?
I have to say, I was shocked
Yeah.
because when I heard about, Alpha Capital, only because I've worked with Chaffa, I've done housing developments with Chaffa, and they're brutal. They just like rake you over the coals with due diligence. And I was like, there's no way they're going to approve him. There's no way. And I was just, shocked because I watched when the mortgage committee approved him. And there was no, I guess, the person's experience wasn't a checkbox, so they didn't even, consider it. And they're also trying to promote new people, new emerging people to come in. So they saw this as an opportunity of somebody new coming into the affordable housing sector. But if you did a quick search on him, and this is what I just don't understand. You didn't have to go that far to do due diligence. All you had to go is into his LinkedIn profile, and he talks about his business, his business strategy of, and I think it's something like, doing minor renovations with tenant replacement, with forced appreciation.
What do you- That's
what he
said?
was talking about, and it's insane. So I would really I started scribbling something quick in terms of a resolution. But what I would like to do is maybe, let's talk about doing a resolution that could go to the Board of Selectmen next week for them to consider. Because I think if we have an action item, it makes it easier for them.
Yep.
That they have this done. They're not thinking off the cuff. They're not thinking about how to do this.
Can we submit it to Chaffa too?
We probably can't, the Board of Selectmen can.
Yeah, that's interesting because they themselves need to rescind their mortgage assumption, because they were just like, oh, the town is not approving it, so it's a moot point, but they never came out to
Wait a
say.
minute, back up a sec. Who said that?
Chaffa said
Chapa
that.
said the town is not approving it?
They said the town is not approving it, even though technically the town did approve it.
Okay, that's really confusing.
Yeah, it is very
To hear that.
confusing. Well, that's
And
why
it's,
there's a
they're
lot
not
of
going on
Yeah.
record too.
like wrong misinformation guiding decisions. It's really crazy. It's just like when Tyler first came here, he said that Chaffa approved them. Well, the asset management group approved them. It didn't go up the food chain yet.
He came to the Board of Selectmen, he made a presentation to the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah,
Okay.
that Chaffa approved
Okay.
them. But so technically, a part of Chaffa approved it, but it's just like who's asking questions, right? And
We've had the same person running that senior housing complex since it was built.
Right.
So
That's what
the
I said.
people who were residents of Woodbridge that were involved with the construction of that are no longer here.
yeah.
And that's the unfortunate thing, is we've lost the institutional knowledge on how that was set up and how it was meant to be. So we have people who are on boards and commissions that don't have any understanding of how it works.
Well, you could have.
So now we need to figure this out pretty quickly.
Right, and you could do a RFQ, and you could do a RFQ to get and I would suggest a nonprofit developer that comes in that has access to funding to really recapitalize that whole development, because that needs a do-over.
It's 30 years old
Yeah.
and it needs.
Yeah.
It needs
A lot of work.
a
Yeah.
complete
Yeah.
do-over.
Yeah.
And so there's particularly a nonprofit that specializes in elderly housing. And there's companies out there that do this, and they don't take the money out as, Capital, Alpha
Yeah.
Capital was talking about. They're not sucking the money out for profit. They're reinvesting into the property, and they're also, getting funding for residential services to make sure that there is the appropriate level of care for the residents. This would have been a disaster, but I think we really need to just nip this. And maybe they were planning on doing this, next week. I don't know, but it just has to be done, because you have to start getting somebody in there to start renovating those units and doing something about the rents to make sure not only the 6 units that are affordable, to make sure they all become affordable. And you could do that with the right, capital stack of financing, and that's what has to be done.
So what's the resolution?
Well, all right, I see if I can read my own handwriting. I have I used to do resolutions when I worked for the city of Bridgeport. I was like,
You are the resolution queen?
yeah, actually, I used to have to write them on the fly, so it kind of reminds me of anyway. Whereas Warner is a critical component of Woodbridge's affordable housing, whereas the experience and qualification of an operator are essential for maintaining the well-being of elderly and disabled residents, and whereas Alpha Capital lacks, the necessary expertise to manage affordable elderly housing and has not demonstrated the requisite experience in elderly housing management. Therefore, be it resolved that the Woodbridge Housing Committee recommends that the Board of Selectmen, and I have two things. One, withhold consent to the assignment of the Warner ground lease to Alpha Community based on the lack of experience. And two, initiate a formal RFQ to find a qualified operator for Warner that is acceptable to the current owner and Jaffa, that can develop and provide property management and residential services that meets the specific needs of the elderly and disabled of our town. I don't know if we need to add more. Does that
That sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I think so too.
I have a question.
Me
You
too.
go first, Alon.
I have, wasn't it, so it's, who's managing it now? There's nobody in charge right now of Warner?
No,
No,
the
they have-
person that owns it still owns it. They haven't transferred ownership as far as I know yet. I believe the original property owner still manages it.
Yeah, he had somebody that was doing residential services. He had somebody from some company that was doing it. Because I looked it up, I forgot what her name was.
Is he in Cheshire?
Mhm.
Yeah, because I remember, my sister's disabled, and I remember calling to find out about the specifics of it, and it sounded very good. At the time, I think there was a waiting list, actually.
There
Yeah.
always is, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been that.
I'm guessing. That sounds good, Kathy.
There's this-
Mhm.
Are all 30 of the units affordable?
No.
No, only 6 units are designated affordable.
That's right.
However, the other units, the other 24 units, he did keep them affordable. So it was one
So
of those
they're
examples
below
of,
our-
it's actually a true example of Noah, where, like, the kid was saying,
It's naturally affordable housing.
he didn't jack
Yeah.
he didn't jack it up.
No.
He
Yeah.
could have jacked it up because there was no restrictions on how high he could charge rent for those that were
For the
not.
other-
But he did, and that's one of the reasons why I think he probably had problems with
Upkeep.
upkeep and maintenance and things of that sort. Because he never raised the rents because people couldn't pay the rent. Like what are you gonna do? So he
I know one person who lives there.
So I have a question, and I don't know that you would know the answer, but can the Board of Selectmen issue an RFQ to select a more qualified person or company to oversee and take over this property? Or would that fall on the shoulders of the owner?
He would have to do, that's a good point, I should write that in there. They would have to work with the owner.
They
I
would
think
have to
I wrote
work
that
with
in
the
there.
owner.
Yeah. And no, it would have to be acceptable to that's why I put down to
Yeah.
the current
So,
owner in Jaffa. So it would have to be, the RFQ would have to be done, in partnership with the owner.
Okay. Our resolution it sounds great as it is, and they're gonna take it and they're gonna
Yeah,
do whatever they need to
they're
do
gonna
with
chop it up, yeah.
So that's fine. I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor? Perfect. All right, Vika, understand my writing, Mary.
That was
So-
nice
Well,
scribble.
you know what, I'll write it up, because do you want me to write this up and send it to you?
Unless you want me to type it up and send it to you. You fix it.
It's pretty bad.
Okay, you type it up.
Where did you come by this video?
Yeah, where did that
It's
come from?
online. You look
You're
it up.
kidding.
You
I
can,
had heard about it, but I had not seen it.
Wow.
It is online.
It's so
and
offensive.
if anybody
And
wants,
she was the one who said that he dropped out of Quinnipiac to make all this.
Glad I
Yeah.
didn't wear my Quinnipiac shirt.
Really,
I know, mate.
He's a drop.
No, he dropped out.
There you go.
so offensive.
So,
It's yeah, I mean, and this is the reason why you got these speculators coming in, doing this, and this is part of the reason why we have a housing crisis.
Housing crisis,
On top of a lack of, affordable housing or a lack of housing, you have somebody coming in doing stuff like this. And this is what's, causing, increase of homelessness and
I looked at the one you told me about in Orange, off Racebrook Road. It's beautiful.
oh yeah, you saw
It's really everybody should go see it.
Which one is this?
It's actually on this poster that fell down. I'm happy like people are keeping this poster up, but
It's really lovely.
it's this one.
Where is that?
This is it's off of Smith.
It's off of Racebrook Road
Is
as
that-
you're, it's just before you hit the Boston Post Road on the left. Like maybe 2nd Street from the Boston Post Road.
Okay.
And it's,
So it's, you go
can't see
down
it.
the street, and
Yes,
then it's at the,
yes,
so
you
it's
can't
behind,
see it.
behind Orange Fence.
Yes, you
Okay,
can't
I know where
see
you-
it from,
okay.
you can't see it from Racebrook Road. You have
Yeah.
to drive down the street.
I thought it was a different picture.
Okay. Well, I feel good about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that's,
we'll
it's
go-
right, it's in our wheelhouse.
Yeah. No, it definitely is to make recommendations, and you know, I think Scott should go and play his
I think
video
he
for the
should,
Board of
I think he
Selectmen.
should. He's done the research on this, he
Yeah.
should go and make a presentation.
Yeah.
For sure.
But anyway.
Okay.
Okay, with that, let's move on. We started talking about our town's update of the POCD, and we're looking at how many rental units there are, which I know is in there, but just to give an overview of what they talked about, you know, I provided three documents.
Yeah.
They did a community survey, and hopefully everybody did fill out the community survey when it went out. But they did have what I thought was really good results for the community survey. They had a 7% response rate. They had 633 people respond, which I thought was great because I thought the survey was painful. So I thought it was pretty good that they got that many.
That's very different.
And it seemed to be pretty geographically, distributed.
Do you know when they need comments by? What's the timeline on this?
Well, at this point, because it's a TPC thing,
Yes.
they want us to give them comments by September 17th. They gave us 2 weeks,
Okay,
or maybe, is that 2 weeks?
it's 2 weeks.
Is it 2
It's
weeks?
13 days.
Okay.
Less than 2 weeks.
So if you have comments, so I have to funnel them through, so it's really planning and zoning is giving them comments, but if you have comments that you want to funnel through me, I could give them to Chris. And as for everybody, if you see something that doesn't sound right, 'cause
I went through it very quickly because
Yeah,
I
me
just, like
too.
I
I
said,
didn't-
this afternoon, and there's some things, I have some questions on some numbers in here that don't add up, but,
yeah, yeah.
you know,
No, I think it's.
I'm gonna spend a little more time on it.
Yep. So in terms of the overview of the participants, I thought this was interesting. 52, like almost 53% lived in Woodbridge for 20 years, 91.2 are homeowners. There was 39% were couples with children at home. There was a question as to whether or not you would still live in Woodbridge 10 years from now, and 26% said no, and as to why, and they said the cost of living, the taxes, and that there's no place to downsize. They wanted to downsize. So that, again, this is why we need to have housing
Options.
options.
Well, it's good to have this on paper and to have this as a response, because these are things that we've known for a long, long time.
Yeah, and
Based on our own survey and our own experience, but,
I was pleased that
being
that
able
people.
to point
I-
to this and say, this is what we need, and this is
Right.
how we need to fix it.
So that, you know, the takeaways with the results, they talked about like the housing. I'm just gonna go for the housing. There was community results in quality of life, community pride, housing, economic development, business, but, I gave you all the documents. But in terms of the housing, the overall feeling, they felt that, housing was the right mix, but would like support having small, single-family condos and mixed use. And 60% talked about that, talked about the need for affordable housing, accessible housing. So I thought that was encouraging.
Yeah, but notice what they say. They say they want small, affordable, single-family houses.
Or condos?
Condos.
I do.
Yeah. But if you watch the, and if you want more information on, these reports, SLR did do a presentation last night at Planning and Zoning, so you could tune on to that. I know it's a lot of time to like watch other meetings, but he did do a pretty good presentation on this and went through everything and answered some questions. So, you could tune into Planning and Zoning to see the whole discussion on that. So the housing takeaways, housing in Woodbridge is 84% owner occupied, and 100% of owner occupied are single-family detached structures.
That's not true. That's not true. It's not
No.
100%. Because I live in a house, which is a single-family home, and it has an apartment attached to it. So I saw that. That's one thing I flagged. So it's just one little thing
Yeah,
that
I just,
needs
like-
to be adjusted.
Okay.
Because if I do, and maybe there's other ones.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw that we have 7 mobile homes in Woodbridge. I can't picture a single one. So these are some things that we need to take some time and go through this, I
Yeah,
think. We can't
yeah.
just gloss over it. This is way too important to just gloss over. I think we all really need to take some time and go through it.
Okay, yeah,
For
but I
sure.
was just reading that. That's, I
I thought that was against zoning regulations, yeah,
What?
mobile home.
I had no idea that, it says that there's a percentage of the housing stock, and I'll find that page in a second, if I can. Here we go. 100, okay, housing type by tenure, mobile homes, it's 2.2%, it says.
really,
Renter occupied housing types, 2.2%, says mobile home.
it's more than
It could be
affordable
wrong, it could be
housing.
wrong, I mean, it could be an error, so we just have to figure that out.
Okay, all right, yeah, well, everybody,
Yeah, I mean, so the thing where it says 100% of owner occupied units in Woodbridge are 1-unit detached structures.
That's-
Mine is a 2-unit structure, and I'm owner occupied. So,
So you're
It's-
probably not the only person.
I may not be the only
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, well, if you have a
I'm sure that I'm not
actually,
the
if you have
only
a
person.
duplex, one's the
Yeah,
owner,
there's a
one's a
bunch of
renter, right?
duplexes downtown.
Correct.
And we have a lot, I mean,
We have, I don't know,
duplexes down.
I don't know how many people live in one and rent out the other. There may be some.
Right,
But I know it's not, I know that's not accurate.
Yeah,
So we
okay,
probably,
all right,
they probably
so-
need to do a deeper dive into the data.
they do, well,
to get that
there's
information.
a lot,
Yeah.
I saw a couple things as well. The median home value in Woodbridge is 506,400. Most homes are valued over 300. I think that's,
I'm looking
True.
for the 0.5% home valued at under 50,000, and the 1/3% of a home valued between 50 and 100,000. Because I can't imagine there's any homes in Woodbridge valued under 50,000 or under 100,000. So they have
This is a
0.8% of them.
Mobile home.
It says they are. Again, I don't even know. I can't envision where they are.
well,
So that's information I think we need
yeah.
to probably
We'll
get
have to
more
clean it
data
up.
on.
This is our time to clean it up because we
Yeah,
didn't, we had talked,
What page are you guys looking at?
this is housing.
21.
21?
Well, I'm looking at 29 from the housing,
I was looking at 21
Commu-
home
community
You
values.
sent us-
profile.
You sent us 3 documents, community profile, I'm looking at page 21, which
Mm-hmm.
talks about home values. These are a different number? It's what you sent to
oh
me.
no, I'm talking, this is, the housing takeaways on page 29.
29, it's good for that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's kind of a sum up of the other pages.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, just for people in TV land, I just wanted to do a summary. They talk about rent in Woodbridge is higher than that of the Scroggin State. I don't think there's any debating there.
I would like to see the data on that. I just am curious where they come up with, how do they know what the rents are? No one's ever asked me what my rent, I own 10 units in Woodbridge, okay? So no one's ever asked me how much am I charging for rent in my units. They're all affordable, way affordable. But no one's ever asked, so how do they come up with these numbers if you haven't asked landlords what they charge?
You mean it's not a matter of public record? I guess it
No, it's
isn't,
not.
right? No, of course.
They're privately owned
Yeah,
homes.
yeah.
So,
That's a good question.
yeah, well, we need to know the
Yeah.
answers to that.
Yeah.
So,
I thought they were, So how does someone track like the, the average rent in
Exactly.
in a
How
town
does someone track the average rent
if no one's
if
asking?
you don't know what the rents are?
Okay.
It makes me wonder if they're tracking some rents, but not all the rents.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
But I mean, that's another thing that
Yeah.
needs to be figured
Okay.
out.
Let's see, 16%, and I thought this statistic,
Interesting, yeah.
16% of households in Woodbridge qualify as low income, but only 1.15% of housing units are protected affordable units. 33, I think.
That's an old number, isn't it? The one
That is a
point-
low number. I think it's probably going down because we
I
have more
thought it was
units.
0.7 by now.
Yeah. 33.5% of renter-occupied units in Woodbridge are cost burden compared to 17.1% of owner-occupied units. And cost burden is when you're paying more than 30% of your income.
I once again will question, how do they come up with that figure without having to know every single tenant's income, which they don't know?
Well, they have, I'm sure there's a methodology that they.
There may be some sort of estimate,
Yeah.
but it's not a reliable number because they don't know my tenant's income. So how would they know that if they're cost burdened or not?
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's probably a good question.
Yeah.
I could, you
But
could
Kath-
ask me to ask
Yeah.
SLR, or I could ask them directly, whatever works, because that's a good question.
Are these findings based on the result of the survey?
No, this is their data.
Okay.
Yeah.
The housing and
They do
HUD
American
does this,
Community,
doesn't it?
I think American Community Survey, is there any type of survey you take that might talk about? No?
And if there was, it's private information, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't have to give the information. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Good question.
And this statistic, this was actually in the economic development part.
What page are you on?
I don't know what page I got, this was in, after the housing was economic
Oh, yeah,
development.
okay.
So, they talked about people
which
working in
document are you
Woodbridge.
on?
The employment in Woodbridge. Yes.
93% of people working in Woodbridge travel from outside Woodbridge. So only 7%.
How do they know that? I'm just wondering how they would know.
Well, even if it's near true,
I just
I think
have to wonder, where do they get the data? Because no one's ever asked me if my employees live in Woodbridge or don't live in Woodbridge. So I don't know where they would get the information. I'm
I
curious.
think when you do, they got this, I think, from the American Community Survey, where you do talk about, do you ever do the census?
Yep.
Okay,
It's like the regular census?
there's a regular census, and then there's the American Community Survey, which is like every 5 years.
Yeah.
So they get it from that.
Okay, I don't recall that question, but it could have been on there.
Yeah,
Mm.
so they do know that, but again,
I'm curious on the page prior, which talks about employment in Woodbridge, how they've done this, and then maybe this is outside of our purview, but we are reviewing the whole thing. I didn't realize we had 15% of our employment is in waste management and mediation. And they have 564 jobs
yeah.
listed for that. I find that to be impossible.
Well, I think that's a job for the economic development.
That's administration and support though, too, right?
If
So
you,
that's-
the public administration, if you flip to a couple pages and you look at the principal employers, Amity and Woodbridge Board of Education have over 500 employers, and
Yeah.
educational services are 441, so
Yeah.
it's not accurate.
Yeah.
And this
yeah.
is
I
economic
saw it.
development's aspect of that, so those need to be fixed.
Yeah. And then also, I was just wondering, like, in terms of employers, because I know, like, Marrakesh, I know they gotta have over 500 employees, but they're not in Woodbridge.
Correct.
So I don't know if they don't count that because they're not in Woodbridge.
But that's a good question, because if their corporate headquarters is here,
Yeah.
are they paid through Woodbridge and working outside of the town? I don't know.
Yeah, so that would, I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of my questions,
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna ask. So I wanted just to do, I wanted folks to look at this information.
Yeah.
I think it's really good that we're diving deep into it because we need to have obviously, to move forward with any housing options, we need to have the correct data in here. But I think generally speaking, you know, it's pointing to a need for more housing opportunities.
Yep.
So I don't think we have to like dig too deep, but certainly there's some information that needs to be cleared up.
It's, you know, it's not really, all of this is not really related to what we're doing here, but as Woodbridge residents, we want to make sure the plan of conservation and development is as accurate as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility as residents to look at this when we have more time.
Right, and again, I wouldn't go too crazy, like, because people are going to be, there's going to be initial
A lot of people looking at it.
update to this. Because I'm sure everybody else on planning and zoning is looking at this and having the same question. So there is going to be another iteration of this.
Looking at this a little more carefully, because the bottom of some of the pages, it cites the source. And for the housing type, the source is a 2022 ACS 5-year estimate.
Yeah, ACS.
So it's just an estimate.
Right.
So it's not really applicable. You got to have something better than that.
Well, no, that's American Community Survey. That's a census.
But we can do better than this for Woodbridge. We're not New York City. We're Woodbridge. There's not that many houses here. We should be able to know that there's not 7 mobile homes here. That's,
I don't know.
just to make it
We
accurate.
couldn't count how many ADUs we had.
We'll all go through that. We'll take a look at it.
Oh, my, okay.
All right, well, we're gonna, I think we'll move off this.
Yeah.
So again, you know, I appreciate your due diligence in going through that. You know, send me over what you think. Again, just bear in mind that you might want to wait until the next iteration for it to get cleaned up, you
Yes.
know. But if you want to send, you
Yep.
know, some pertinent
Markup.
questions,
Yep.
particularly the ones that you brought up, like, gee, no one, I'm a landlord and no one's asking me. I mean, I think that's,
I mean, it turns out those are all estimates.
yeah,
So,
so it's estimates, okay.
yeah.
Well, you just need to understand the methodology of how they do those
Well,
estimates. And I'm sure, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
this is,
But we
they
base,
must-
we base facts on estimates. We can't really do that. We can't do that. We're making decisions based on this. We can't do that. We have to make decisions based on the facts, not on estimates. We really have to work on that.
well,
But that's, anyways, we can move on. We don't want to
Okay.
dwell on that.
so anybody, again, I have to give some thoughts to Chris Sullivan by the 17th. So if you want to give me your thoughts, you know, before the 17th, actually, preferably like because I'm going to be away from the 14th to the 18th. So if you could do it by like the 13th, that would be helpful. Okay. Good. The next item on our agenda is furthering community conversations.
So, Ben Fink is setting up, but outside the housing committee, trying to get another conversation going in September, perhaps September 17th. It's slow going, and housing is not leading the conversation. So I don't actually know how it's relating at the moment to this committee. Were we going to try to show that PBS film?
Yeah, I did want to talk about that a little bit.
I mean, that would be in my mind like an important way to further the community conversation is by showing that film.
There's going to be a screening, an official screening of that PBS. Did you see the PBS?
I did.
Yeah.
I started to look at it. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
very serious concerns about it. There's going to be a screening of it?
There's going to be a screening of it in Hartford on September 25th, and they're going to have a panel because they do the screening and they have a panel conversation.
Who is
and, they arrange it. This is like the Connecticut Public TV and actually even Cirrus Group, Connecticut Fair Housing Center. And they get other panelists on board. They had somebody from the Eviction Lab. They actually had a screening in Stanford a couple weeks ago, and they had like Sean Giel, the Partnership for Strong Communities. They had a program manager from Inspirica that talked about working with homeless families. They had, what else did they have?
Where was that shown, Kathy?
That was in Stamford. I
Stamford.
forgot exactly where.
And
But now they're doing another official screening in Hartford. And on the panel is, actually I saw Sarah White is going to be on the panel. I could send you the information if you want to sign up. I'm going to go. I want to see how the panel is, because I think it's something that we might want to think about doing it for the New Haven area, because they haven't done it for the New Haven area. They did it for the Stamford area, which is Fairfield County, and they did it for Hartford. And Ben did it
unofficially in Milford.
In Milford, and they had a panel discussion.
And apparently there was a very good community conversation
Yeah.
following the film.
Yes, so I think I want to see how the Hartford, and I think the Hartford one is also going to have Representative Jason Rojas, who's I think he's head of the housing committee, but he's really good. If you ever hear him talk,
Yeah.
and I can't think of who else is going to be on it, but I'll send that out if
Okay.
you want to. If you want to sign up, Scott and I are probably going to be going.
What day
So
is it?
one is September 25th, but I'm not around for that. What was the date of there was another one?
What date is this panel in Hartford?
That's September 25th.
Yeah, I
I'm out of
can't
town.
make that one.
Yeah.
Do we know if CPTV is going to edit it, since the statistics quoted by the governor that we've had an inflow of new residents, net residents to the state in the last few years is not correct, because they used the wrong census numbers? This was reported over the summer, that his speech, where he talks about we've had an influx of new residents, net residents in Connecticut over the last several years, and this is part of the housing crisis, is not true. It's not his fault. Somebody used the wrong census numbers.
Well, there is a problem with the census numbers.
Yes,
It's
it's been reported over the summer.
Yeah,
so-
it's been
so-
reported. So.
Yeah, so will that be edited by CPTV?
I don't know. I could ask. Actually, I was talking to the woman who did the story production of that.
That should be
Sabrina
edited out,
Buckwalter.
because it's not accurate. I have very serious concerns about that. I watched about 25 minutes of it, and they disparaged two people who live in Woodbridge. And the whole point of that is to talk about the lack of affordable housing and the restrictions put on affordable housing. So it's really about affordable housing. And there were two women that were in that clip that were picked out of a Board of Selectmen meeting where they were talking about open space. They weren't talking against affordable housing. They were at a Board of Selectmen meeting talking about protecting open space.
Yeah,
And I found that to be really disingenuous. These people are good people. I know both of them well. But they were picked and misrepresented. And I don't think that's right. There's so much information, good quality information on affordable housing. Why don't we focus on that? I found that to be really disturbing.
But I think the
that they did
point that they were making in there is that and I think that was a planning and zoning meeting.
It was a Board of Selectmen meeting. I went back and looked.
That was a Board of
It was a
Selectmen
Board of
meeting?
Selectmen meeting.
Okay, because I thought I was at that meeting.
I went back and looked at it. Actually,
Okay,
have it.
I believe you.
have
I
it.
believe
So,
you.
I printed the page. It's December 14th, 2022, Board of Selectmen regular meeting. They were talking about Country Club of Woodbridge
Well,
property.
they talk about it at a lot of different places. They have
Correct,
this,
they do.
They
But
have
this-
the
but
same.
when you watch the video, it has December 14th, 2022
Okay.
on the bottom.
Okay.
So I matched it up and found it, and it's really
It's a Board of
disingenuous
Selectmen.
to disparage
but
people
what
who
I'm-
have good intentions. And the people that created this video manipulated that, and I think that's really unfair.
Okay, see, you feel it was manipulated. I don't see it that way. We
Okay.
have different lenses. So
Yeah,
let's just be.
we do.
We're gonna
Yeah.
see things differently. So
Yeah.
you see it as a manipulation. I saw it as what they were trying to present was that, and they said planning and zoning. So if it was Board of Selectmen, then that's not correct, because they were trying to say that planning and I thought it was a plan, because I I swear it was there. But anyway, we could figure that one out. But the idea was that planning and zoning commissioners are not environmental experts. And so, that was the point that they were
Wait.
trying to make, because they were talking about.
They're saying that those two people are not environmental experts? And they're
No,
planning
not
zoning
those two people.
Okay.
The planning and zoning commission are not.
Correct, they're not.
Yeah.
So when they were, your point is that they were using those people unfairly to make a point.
To make a point that Woodbridge residents, and they don't
They don't say
list them as Woodbridge residents, but I recognize both of them through their masks.
Because you know them.
As
yeah.
Woodbridge
Yeah.
residents,
Yeah.
are anti-affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not the meeting at all. It was not about affordable housing. It was about protecting the country club as open space. I feel like it's a mischaracterization of what.
It's
of them.
interesting because what I remember, because I haven't gone back to look at it, so that's a big caveat right there. But what I took away from that was that they were illustrating some of the kinds of typical objections that people raise to the development of property.
Okay.
That's what I took away.
But there's been no affordable housing application for that property. This is the thing. If it's about, if the video is about development, okay. It's not about development. It's about the restrictions on affordable housing. Okay, that's what that
It's always about the
CPTV. It's about
restriction
affordable
of that, yeah.
restrictions on affordable housing in Connecticut.
Well, it's
So-
about,
Anyway,
it's
I'm
about
just
the
saying what I
zone,
took
they
away from
focus
it.
on the zoning, the zoning aspects and then the exclusionary approaches in
Yes.
zoning.
Yes.
The fact that we have 2-acre zoning and things of that sort there.
Do we know why we have 2-acre zoning?
Yes, we do.
Why?
It's historic, it's all in the,
It's about your septic systems.
I know that.
All right, let's-
But
all right.
if you look
We're not
if you look
doing
at
that.
certain aspects in our town, places in our town where we don't have it, and we have smaller lots, we have contamination of septic, and that's a problem.
All right, there's plenty
Yeah.
of other towns that are in the public water
Yes. We
that
can see
have,
that.
acre zoning, so that is,
You
when
can,
when
I've studied the history of the planning and zoning as an historian. It's all in the history. It's a really interesting
It's a
story
history.
of the evolution, starting at 900 square feet and gradually getting bigger. Some of the reason, as you said, is because we ran out of optimal property, as I understand it. We ran out of optimal property for smaller lots. But going back to the very beginning, a lot of it's just aesthetic. I can tell you for a fact.
Yeah, we're gonna really differ on 2-acre zoning, because there's nothing that requires us to have 2-acre zoning. And I know you could go back to a blue ribbon report from 1988 that talks about it, but a lot has changed from that. But I think that's gonna be a discussion that we probably could hash out at
A very
Talk-
interesting one.
Talking about
Yep.
POCD, there's going to be a
Yes.
community workshop on that Tuesday. I'm trying to think of the dates. So October's going to be really, really busy because we have, because I will be getting to participating in Woodbridge Like Me Day, which will be on October 5th, and that's a Saturday. And then we have planning and zoning special meeting, which is October 7th. And then on October 8th, there is going to be a community workshop on the POCD.
Do you know where that's going to be?
They initially said it was going to be in this room, and some of us said,
That's not going to work.
that's not going to work.
Too small.
It's too small.
So I think we're looking at the senior,
Center.
cafe
the center.
center. Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Good.
Okay, that makes more sense.
yeah.
Or the gym.
Yeah, was it the senior, where we had our little talk? The senior center.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the cafeteria.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cafeteria.
As opposed to the gym, which is also part
Right.
of the
Yeah, I
center.
Right.
guess.
You don't
but-
call it the senior center anymore.
Oh, whatever.
The center, right?
The
Yeah.
center building, the gym in the
Yeah.
center building, right?
Yeah, which isn't a whole lot bigger than this room, as a matter of fact.
The gym.
The gym
Meaning the
is.
gym, yeah. Yeah. But if you had it downstairs in the old cafeteria, that'd probably be big enough. Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe.
It's hard to say
Just
how many
depends.
people would come.
Yeah, so,
Cozy.
you know, I'm sure these types of conversations are
Yep.
going to be ongoing, so I'm sure there's, you know, people are gonna be articulating their interests, and that's why we're doing it. And I do think, they are leaning towards having, the different committees meet with the consultants. I'm not sure if there's gonna be like a big committee meeting where you have like all the committees kind of meeting together with consultants, or whether or not there's gonna be some targeted. I mean, it's only so many hours he has to really meet with committees and commissions. But there is gonna be, some time for us outside of the community workshops. So it's not like we have to show up at community workshops in order for us to have input into the plan. There's gonna be some special time made for us.
Who will be running the community workshop?
You know, they didn't really spell it out, I have to say. I imagine planning and zoning is gonna be there, but who's gonna be actually running the tables, I don't know. There's, you know, the consultants, and they have some staff, but I'm not exactly sure who's
Okay.
gonna be running the tables. But are we good with furthering community conversation?
I just wanted to mention that
Oh,
I
yeah,
did
you-
attended the SCROG training thing that Ben did last week.
Yeah.
It was the second of these training things. I don't think either one of them is available online yet, although they did record them. The first one was, you know how he does, you haven't been with that when Ben came to train us,
Mhm.
really, and to see him. Well, you participated in it?
You were at
No, I
one,
was at one meeting.
one
when
meeting,
he
yeah,
came
at the,
and
With him,
At
so
the
you sort of,
Yeah.
the library.
so his approach in these meetings, the first one was to talk about doing one-on-one conversations and how you approach people. That's one I haven't seen yet. This one was about groups, and so that was more similar to what we were experiencing when we did the library things and when we did the center meetings and so forth. And the various types of formula that you use or setups. One of them, popcorn, where everybody is encouraged to put their hand up, you know, and you just do round robins, or other things like that. So none of that would have been particularly striking for us, although it's always good to have it kind of summarized. So if we ever do get the tapes, I would not recommend watching that first hour. One of the things that I thought was particularly interesting about what he was saying was the need to understand your audience very well, and before you start trying to manage the conversation. And I think about the fact that a lot of the groups that he works with, a lot of the groups who are talking in different towns about these subjects are quite different depending upon the character of the town and the character of the people who live in the town, and their perspective changed quite a lot on the basis of their experience, on the basis of their race, their class, their educational level, and all that sort of thing. And I think we need to understand our audience very well when we speak to people about what they already know and what they don't already know. I'm not sure exactly how that will all work out, but we will have opportunities to communicate on the subject of affordable housing with a wide range of people, and we need to think about how we best do that. He emphasized in this particular training that you want to get people to be engaged, and we have heard him talk about this quite a lot. The idea would be to get people into the conversation and not just give them some information or let them vent or whatever it is, and then, but to get them engaged. And that's been quite a struggle for us. And he did say one thing that resonated with me. So one thing you have to do is give them something to do. Give them something to do, and it has to be something that you have a reasonable, this not his words, reasonable expectation of some degree of success or action will come out of it. So not only do you have a focus for what you're thinking about and what you're planning, but you actually have the impetus that comes from some kind of satisfaction as a result of seeing how that's been received by others or how it's been actioned. And I think that we have some of that, or we can look forward to some of that here in town. One of the things that we have had difficulty with, of course, is that action. How do you go from where we are right now to building, or to getting something done? How do you get something built? How do you get something approved? What do we do? We do newsletters, and that's fine, but what we're doing really is preparing ourselves for having the information that we need to disseminate at the time that people are looking for answers. And they're saying, what can we do? And as an example, the most obvious example is when we go into the discussions about what to do with the Country Club of Woodbridge. And the message you need to have in a situation like this is not, oh my gosh, this is awful and we're going to lose all this terrible stuff, but rather, we have a problem and this is the solution. Can we all agree on a solution? And can we discuss the solution? And it's not the first time I've had occasion to say, if you don't agree on the problem, you're never going to get to a solution.
Right.
So just thinking about it in that way and being really prepared to say, to address the things we know we're going to hear, and of course, as usual, in a respectful manner, in a way that's going to make sense to the people that we're talking to. Of course, if you listen to people who do this for a living, they will tell you, unfortunately, you're never going to reach everybody. And there's going to be a certain number of people, a certain percentage of your audience that you just have to let them go. And you have to concentrate on the people who are listening to you, who get what you're trying to say, and who will help you amplify it. And they will amplify it to the people who don't have information, but then can hear it in a positive way. And then you broaden the base, but you have to have a message. So that's kind of what we're doing here, I think. And that's sort of what Ben was talking about, too. You have to sense some kind of momentum. And maybe your momentum, in the case of housing, of course, is just glacial, anything that you can do. So the momentum has to be in, and we've seen this, the number of times that the subject comes up, the number of places where people are reading about it, and about how it applies in Woodbridge. And then it just starts to get more normal. To think about it, and then you realize, this is something, and then what can we do about it? Well, we can, protect the Warner houses. That's one thing we can do.
Yeah,
And if we can think of anything
specific.
else, and we need to tell people that that's the kind of thing that we do.
I think you're right, Mary, because the last meeting that Ben orchestrated was at my house, and the consensus, and maybe because it was an older group of people that I invited, without specific goals, they're reluctant to, like, wait, what is this about? What are we doing? They need specific goals and direction. And I think that is very essential to moving forward.
And it's a real challenge with this subject because it's so complicated. And there's so many details, and there's so much statistics, and there's so much drag on the land. And one of the reasons I was recommending that article about the Atlantic was that it was taking a set of circumstances and just sort of walking the reader through what the owner came up against first, and then what they come up against next, and then what they come against next, and how it just wears you out, and you end up not getting, your live-in apartment for your father to come and live with your family kind of thing. And it's very sympathetic kind of thing. It's too long, perhaps, for the kinds of things that we need to have, but just as a way of introducing the problem. And that's what Ben tries to do. He tries to get people to tell stories about how they themselves have encountered the problem of finding housing. So you have this lens through which you're looking at this much larger issue. And I think maybe we can look at what we're looking at and thinking about from that lens and see if we can find something maybe for the newsletter that gives an example of some problem here in Woodbridge or somebody's experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed that there's no more Woodbridge Town News, and even trying to look online, I can't really figure out.
It is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a shame.
Because I always wanted to have, like, you know, I was trying to get it, even when Chris was with us, like, get a little like corner article of, you know, a story of housing, and, you know, from different perspectives, you know, be it, you know, a teacher that teaches here but can't afford to live here, be it a senior that wants to stay in her community but her husband died and she wants to downsize and there's no place for her to go. You know, a young family who grew up here who wants to move back into their community but can't because there's not an affordable, you know, home ownership opportunity, and just have like different stories to show it's really, you know, people that are connected to Woodbridge. The housing issue is impacting people that are connected to Woodbridge, and I think you want to do something to just promote, you know, the people that are like working or want to come back. You want to promote that. You want to make that happen.
And then, but you have to be able to say what you can do, because it's so easy to suddenly go, well, you know, it's just, what can we do? We can't, you know, name the problem. We can't spare any more open space. We can't let our property values drop. We can't, whatever there's just a whole lot of standard. We can't tolerate any more kids in our school. We can't tolerate all the usual stuff that we hear.
Yeah.
Everybody hears all the time. You have to be able, and I feel like when we say, well, you know, actually that's not true.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
1 and 2 bedroom studio apartments don't produce a lot of kids for your school. It just sounds so, I don't know, colorless somehow. The rebuttal sounds, I don't know, somehow having the picture, having the story, having the message, the marketing. We need to work on that if we can.
Yeah. Well, I think it's.
Watch
I
for
think
examples.
actually, when I saw the survey and I saw that 60% of the respondents did indicate that there's a need for affordable housing, I was like, you know,
That's where you start.
we may be getting the message out that I think it's no longer. I think it's moved away, because there were some people who were saying, you know, Woodbridge does not have to. You know, there's no requirement that we have to have affordable housing. We don't have to do this. We can keep it just the way we want it. We don't have to do this. Mm-hmm. And there's been an evolution where they have changed to, yes, we do need it, but we want to put it over here and not anywhere else, you know.
Yeah.
So there is a kind of
Some movement,
There
yeah.
is some movement
Yeah.
in recognizing that this is something we have to do, and I think that in
And
itself.
this is how you do it.
Right.
You have to be ready to articulate in a reasonable, understandable, and, as we know, attractive example manner that you can, you know, I mean, you have to give up something. It's not, things are not going to be the same.
Right.
And that 10% of people, or whoever it is, you know, don't want anything to change. And I get it. But you can't have what you need unless you change what you got, unfortunately. And the best we can do is to make it look okay. You know,
Yeah.
maybe better than okay.
Oh yeah, it's going to be beautiful.
I think there's ways to solve this problem without really a major upheaval in the town. It's just working at it, being careful, being thoughtful, being factual. I think we can do this. You know, I didn't get on this committee to say I don't want affordable housing. I got on this committee because we need affordable housing. You know, I look at the town. We don't have enough housing for single people. We don't have enough housing for elderly people who can't afford or don't want to live in their big home anymore and want to stay. We have some problems, but we have to figure out how to solve these problems, and how do we get people to buy into them. And that's the most important thing. How do we get them to buy into, yes, we have a problem, how do we solve it? How do we all solve it?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Chris. Yeah.
I keep on saying we
same.
need to do the
the same
Thunderdome,
page.
you know, effect. You know, it's just like, all right, we have to build X amount of units. You figure out where you want to do it and see who comes out as a victor. and that's where we do it. Because it really, you know, I mean, it's, we should really have control of the town, you know, should be able to come up with a plan as to where they want to see their housing. And
Well, I think the ADU is a really good start. The accessory dwelling unit is a really good start on how to have more affordable housing in our town.
yeah, but that's not going to get us to the number that we need
It's
to
not
get
gonna-
to.
Well, we've only had 6 applications so far.
Yeah,
I'm kind of disappointed.
yeah.
People
I'm
need to
I'm
look and take
disappointed.
advantage.
surprised.
The two unit, you know, I thought the fact that you could have a 2-unit structure anywhere, I thought people would go crazy over that.
The challenge with things like that comes back to septic systems, because septic systems are designed based on the number of bedrooms that you have in a house.
Right, number of bedrooms.
Okay?
You have big monster
And they have
houses.
huge septic systems.
Right,
Huge septic systems. And so if you're gonna build a 2-family house, and I'm not saying you shouldn't, I'm saying this is a consideration that people need to have. If you're gonna build a 2-family house in Upper Woodbridge, you've gotta build a septic system big enough to handle whatever number of bedrooms you have in each unit. And to build a 2-bedroom duplex in Upper Woodbridge is not gonna be cost effective. It's just unfortunate. This is the reality we're in today. This may change in 5 years, we don't know. But the cost of building has gotten so expensive that unless there's some sort of a subsidy, it's not gonna happen.
right, right.
This
right.
is why we're not seeing
Well, this is why we gotta put
market,
things-
So true.
moderate priced housing being built anymore.
Right, but there is a lot of money that's being, the DOH is putting a lot of money out, not only for, you know, affordable housing, but for like market rate and like 120% FMRs. So there's opportunities now, and now is the time really to start thinking about being creative. And it could be, and we also talked about like having an affordable housing trust fund, because you know it'd be really cool if we got money in there.
Where would the money come from?
There's different, you know, you can have a couple benefactors. There's a couple, you know, you could do, you know, you could have some people contribute, and then there's you could have it some attached like permitting fees, but we don't have enough. To me, we don't have enough development to do something like that. But there's ways of targeting funding into a trust fund. But the point being is that then you could use that to offset the cost of land acquisition, because that's the hardest thing. It's just, you know, buying a piece of land. You know, once you get the land, then there's plenty of subsidies out there to build the affordable housing. But the hardest thing is being able to get a piece of land in order to do that.
Chris, in terms of the septic systems, my understanding of turning a house into a duplex, you're not adding bedrooms. You're dividing the house somehow.
Well,
I think that's what stops people is the difficulty of actually.
Yeah.
I try to think how I would do it in my house. I can't figure it
I
out.
I know.
Do something
Well,
like
I think about this because with the accessory dwelling unit, as long as you have a septic system that's big enough to manage another bedroom, you're okay.
You can
But
have
if you have, let's say you have a septic system designed for a 3-bedroom house, and then you want to do an accessory dwelling unit, add another bedroom, a 4-bedroom septic system is different than a 3-bedroom septic system. So that's where you could run into some trouble. But I'm sure that there are more than 6 people out there that have enough reserve in their septic system to add an accessory dwelling unit. I think that newsletter was a really good start to get people to understand that these are possibilities. When we sit on a board, we think everybody knows things. People don't know this. They just don't. People aren't watching this. They don't know this. And I can't tell you how many times I encounter people in town and they say, wait, we can do what? Or that's allowed? They have no idea. People who, you know, they're just not engaged like that. So
Yeah.
we have to keep that in mind. When you're trying to educate people, we really have to understand they're not as focused as us. They're not passionate about it like we are. They're just regular people doing their thing, and we want to try to get them to understand that these are some issues that we have, and we need to figure out how to solve these issues.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I came across somebody today that was actually at a meeting at my house. Very intelligent person, And when I started explaining how, she said, I'm not against affordable housing as long as it's done properly. And when I started to just tell her about how it could benefit so many people that already are connected to Woodbridge, she said, oh, I never thought about it that way. So
Yes.
to
We
your
have a lot
point.
of other things to think about in this world. It's like, yeah, be ready with your
We had a
messaging.
6-unit development that was built in my neighborhood, probably nearly 20 years ago. And there was so much resistance because they were condos. And there was
Oh,
so
I
much
remember
resistance
them.
initially,
Yeah.
because there were no condos in Woodbridge prior to that.
Yeah.
So there was all this resistance. And in the end, it is so seamless, nobody even notices a difference.
Right.
They're the same people that live in the other houses, whether they're single-family homes or renters or whatever, it's all the same. It's that initial resistance of the unknown that we need to overcome.
Exactly.
Right.
It's true.
Right.
I mean, it's
Good messaging.
interesting, if you watch Planning and Zoning, last night, there was a pre-briefing of an application, a housing application, for Fountain Street, you know, that very, very difficult piece of property right before the bridge by the Woodbridge Country Club. You know, talking about, you know, possibility of going up 4 stories, 90 units, which would be, you know, something different for Woodbridge. And I'm like, you know, bring it on, because I'm like, you know, I think you have to just let it happen so people realize, oh, this isn't
Well,
too bad.
You
This is
can't
pretty
just let
nice.
it happen. You have to plan it. You have to plan it. You
Well,
have
yeah,
to
yeah, plan
anticipate.
it, yeah.
You have to anticipate what are the problems that are being created by that. How can we overcome those problems?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's, you know, I think once people see it, I mean, the same thing with the Toll Brothers. I mean, that's, you know, I try to drive around. Those are pretty nice. And I think once people see that, then they probably wouldn't mind it someplace else, you know. But I think it's just that initial idea of, oh my God, multi-unit housing. Oh my God, that's you know, that's
We have
bad.
quite a lot of it.
When the
Right.
original proposal for that property came before the town, it was a different developer. He had a meeting with the residents of the flats in the little church, which was brilliant. He brought them in and he said, this is what we want to do. Tell us what you think. And he engaged them immediately. And it was brilliant, because there were people in there who were absolutely dead set against it when they walked in the door. And by the time that got to town plan and zoning and was approved, they were speaking in favor of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's anticipating what the problems are, engaging the people, getting them to understand that these are not insurmountable, and here are the benefits of what we're trying to do. And if we can do that, you'll get people on your
Right.
side. But
Carol-
if you don't do that, we're not going to get people on our
Yeah.
side, and that's the key.
Yeah,
That's
but
the key.
Carol Martin, who did Lascana, did exactly that. You know, she knocked on each neighbor's door
The
and
one in orange?
yeah, and talked to them and gave them the plans and explained what she was doing and
Yep.
talked about the community house. And,
So maybe we'll manage with the
yeah,
the
yeah,
Country
but
Club Woodbridge
yeah,
in the
you
same
know,
way.
we do have a lot of, you know, I'm excited by the energy in this room, and we do have a lot of work in front of us. So,
Yep.
We have a big advantage because generally speaking, over the last number of years, people have heard over and over again, and I believe are starting to take as, you know, as fact. We need housing for the elderly.
Mhm.
We need housing for small families. We need to have more diversity in our community. Because I don't think a lot of people thought that 20 years ago, that we need to have different kinds of houses, different kinds of families, different kinds of, you know, residents generally. That having a diversity of economic base is really a good thing. And that's one of the points that Jim makes all the time.
Yeah.
That diversifying your economic base and as well as your housing base and that kind of vitality is important.
I've got to go because.
yeah.
It's 9:00. We're all going to turn into pumpkins.
Yeah. Okay, well, great
So-
discussion, and a little after 9, not terrible. So can I
Okay, are we
have a
adjourned?
motion to adjourn?
I make a motion.
Second.
Okay. All right, guys, so just a reminder, our next meeting is not going to be the first Wednesday of the month. It's going to be the second Wednesday
How come?
because there's a holiday on the
Oh,
first
was
Wednesday.
it a Jewish holiday that
Yeah.
I should know about?
Second-
Whoops.
Second Wednesday of October.
Yeah. It's the first night of Rosh Hashanah.
Okay.